a lot of my listeners have been asking for more inside stories. So I don't know, John, if you've noticed last, I don't know, 4 or 5 episodes, I've been peppering in like some Q&A, or I had Kirk come on. Let's talk about, stories about host homes and what it's like living on the road.
Yeah.
And I think, and I've had some listeners say, we'd love to hear from A&R guys, from record label executives, from, people who used to run tours, even like concert promoters.
Yeah.
And even before they were asking for that, you've been on my short list to get on here because, I mean, you're kind of a consistent figure in this golden era of Christian music. So we'll get to as much as that as we can in this time together. But where I first met you was as the A&R director at Word Records. Of course, we were at Benson. Him was at Benson. You were the A&R guy at Word, and you were handling Point of Grace, and that's, obviously not just them. But that's how we got to know you. And I will just tell you, from the moment you were kind of in our circle as for him, we really liked you, John. I mean, you became a friend. Just always loved seeing you come around. So I'm excited to have you share your story and some of your memories about
incredible
that
to be
era.
here.
Welcome to the 1 Degree of Andy podcast, my friend John Mays.
I sincerely feel honored to be invited. It means a lot.
Well, again, you're part of the story. I say this in so many episodes. You can't tell the story of Christian music without, and I believe your name needs to go in that list. So, like I said, where I first got to know you was because you were an A&R director for at Word for the Point of Grace Girls. So we would see you when we started doing those co-bill tours with them. You would come out a lot, and we would see you not just here in Nashville, but we'd see you. You'd come out on the road and hang out with us.
Yeah.
And so tell me about those days. Like, again, we loved Andy Ivey, great A&R guy at Benson.
Yeah.
We loved Bill Baumgart, who came after Andy.
Amazing.
Great A&R guy there as well. Yeah. And really good friends of ours still to this day. But we really liked what you did with the girls. What was it like? So tell us what an A&R guy does. Okay. I know, but I think it would be better coming from someone who actually did it.
It's funny because there's probably every label would have their own definition of it, right? But I think there are at least 4 functions of an A&R person that any A&R person would say, yeah, I do those 4 things. And when you get the question of what's a typical day like, of course there's no typical day, but you're probably doing some mix of one of these 4 things. And the first is a talent scout role. So the label makes you responsible to find the new artists that you're going to sign to the label. And there's a lot, obviously, that goes into that. But the second would be to probably what I would call song development. So once the artists are signed, you're responsible for helping them get to the set of songs that they're going to record for the next release.
And that's what A&R stands for, artist and repertoire.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people think artist representative or something, but that's the R part, this song development piece. And we may spend more time there than any other place.
Yeah.
It's just tough to
weed A&R can make or break a record.
Yeah.
But,
for a singer-songwriter kind of person, you might be going into a meeting with 60, 80 songs.
Yeah.
You're trying to get down to 10 or 12, or depending on what you're releasing. An EP or whatever. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of diplomacy as you're working with the artist. You may disagree on what those 6 songs should be, right? Yeah. So you're a sounding board for them and giving them your opinions and feedback on those songs. The third would be production oversight. So once you've got the songs, you're going to be ready to record.
Helping choose producers.
Yeah.
Part of your role.
So you don't produce yourself. You are hiring producers. And in this day, it's almost a producer per track. So if you're doing 10 songs, there's likely 10 producers. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And back in the 90s days, those were sweet times of one producer working on the whole records. Not always, but sometimes. And those producers have to be contracted, and they have deadlines and budgets and all these things that also requires oversight from the A&R person. Technically, I guess, from a business perspective, the producer is working for the A&R person. And, they have to turn in a suitable, acceptable recording before they get paid and all that kind of thing. So you're working closely with that person. And almost sort of like the artists and you have sort of dug this trench of like, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
But the A&R person isn't down in the trench. The producer is down in the trench with them. I'm just up here, an A&R person is up here making sure it's going in the right direction. And if you've got 10, 12 trenches going at the same time, sometimes that's a lot to wrestle down. Yeah.
And then what's number 4?
Probably what I would call the artist advocate. You're the champion for the artist at the label. Usually the relationship begins with the A&R person. It's important for the artist to have a good relationship with everybody at the label.
Yeah.
But it's different with the A&R person because you start the relationship. There's something really powerful about approaching any creative and saying, I believe what you do is great. And if we can get it to the right place, I want the world to hear it.
Yeah.
There's a bond that happens in that, And sometimes you have to be that champion to your own label. Sometimes you have to be that champion to producers, writers, other A&R people, booking agents, managers. It extends, the spider web goes out a lot. But
you're kind
to
of a safe
advocate
place
for the artist.
Yeah, you're kind of a safe place for the artist, aren't you?
I hope so. Yeah, you want to be.
Well, yeah, that's the great artist and A&R relationships that I've known and been a part of.
Yeah,
a good A&R is you can kind of create a safe space for your artist to go. Let me fight that battle for you, or bring your issues to me and let me see what I can do.
I haven't heard you guys on this podcast get into the Enneagram, and I don't want to, and I'm not that into it.
I'm not against it. I don't know what people are, but I'm not against it.
I'm not that into it. I don't know what all the numbers are, but when I did my assessment, I'm a 9.
Okay.
Which is the peacemaker.
Right.
And interestingly, we have 4 people in our A&R department at Centricity, and all 4 of us are 9s.
Interesting.
And the part of it that I wonder was that you are sort of in the middle, making peace between 2 different ideas or ideologies or whatever. And when I read that, it's like, man, I've spent almost 40 years explaining creatives to business people and business people to creatives.
Yep.
I think there is some skill of sitting in that middle seat because you work for the label, but you also work for the artist.
Yeah.
And there's tension in that all the time. So how do you help navigate that?
One of the tensions we always had with A&R was budget.
Oh, yeah.
Because now you are working, at that point you are working for the label, but you're also watching out for us because you want us to make money. You want us to, at the end of the record, go, you're going to be able to pay this back with sales. And hopefully, yes. Yeah. But you're also, you got to toe the company line of just going, we got to stay inside the numbers here and make this make sense. But as an artist, you're always going, but if we just had...
If we could get this producer.
If we could just remix this, or if we could just bring one more string section in for this song. And, A&R is always going, guys, I really want that for you. Let me see what I can do. But you already know it's a no. And you're already going, it's not going to happen.
That's a very 9 way of saying no. Yeah. So those are the 4 things that basically all A&R people do, I think.
And how many artists would you have at a time under your wing?
Well, for me, ideally, if you really want to serve the artists you're working for, be involved in their lives, know their families, and them know you well. Mm-hmm. I think 5 or 6 is probably the max. Now, some people just heard that and went 5 or 6 because they oversee 20 maybe, Yeah. But ideally, that's what we try to shoot for now where we are. Now, when I started at Word in 1987, I took on 21 artists.
Wow.
And most of them had to make records the first year I was there.
Oh my God.
It was really good training, but it nearly killed me,
Yeah. Yeah, because it's kind of a 24/7 job, isn't it?
Not as much as like management or road management, some of those things. I feel like most of the artists I've worked with over the years have respected a healthy sort of, I've got a family over here. I'm trying to raise kids in a healthy way. So calling me at 2 a.m., doesn't help, especially when we could talk about this in the morning, just because you're panicking about it right now.
Yeah. Well, and it's good that, another thing that a good A&R person that I know is they can be the bad guy. You can, you can speak on behalf of the artist, or you can also speak on behalf of the label,
and you have to,
you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, I have to be the bad guy. And I say this all the time to worship pastors that I work with. I'm like, if you want to take the glory, you're also going to have to take the punishment. So if you're going to pitch your idea and you got your plan and it's a big success, you're going to get all the pats on the back. But just know, you're also going to be the first one called to the table going, this is a failure. This didn't work. And I know that's what the A&R world is like too. It's like, you're going to be the first one that takes the hit if a record doesn't turn out the right way, or the artist isn't happy with it on their end. It all does go back to A&R.
Right.
Yeah.
You're putting the company's finances at risk for your idea that this artist will succeed.
Yeah.
And by succeed, I mean make money for the company.
So why in the world would you want to do a job like this? What got you into the A&R world?
That's a great question, because I didn't, I'll tell a quick story. I had spent about 5 years as a session player prior to this here in town. I played bass, and that led to some production and songwriting. And there was a guy named Neil Joseph, who you might know, who was running Word Records in Nashville at that time. Had some of that work I had done had made its way to him, and he wanted to have breakfast one morning. We talked. We knew each other a little bit. He had produced some as well, so I'd played on some of his things. But he kind of came out and said, well, I'm running Word now, and I'm going to need to hire an A&R person, and I think you'd be good at it. So this was 1987. I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't want to be so uncool as to say, well, what is that? I had heard the term, but I didn't know what it was. Yeah. So, and there's no Google. So I had to go call a guy and like, hey, what is A&R? What does that mean?
There's a path to success in the music industry of just saying yes.
Yeah, I didn't
say
do
yes
that.
And then figure it out later.
I didn't do that, at least at that breakfast. I did some investigation. And Neil was great about this, because I'd never done anything my whole life except play music. Started in a little Pentecostal church that I grew up in West Texas. And he knew that this is going to be a big, not just identity shift, but lifestyle shift. I'd never worked in an office with office culture and policy and water cooler talk and all that stuff that goes on. He was very helpful that first year for me in helping me navigate that shift. But my identity really did change from player, producer, creative guy to A&R. But I will say, just like what you're saying, the guy I called was a guy named Bob McKenzie. Do you know that name?
Oh, yeah, legend.
Who had been an A&R person at Benson. And I'll get to this part of the story, I guess. But he had A&R'd the band that hired me, that moved me to Nashville. And I was like, hey, Bob, what do you know what A&R means?
That was the Imperials. Is that the Imperials?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But he said, well, I'm going to tell you what it is. But before I do, you want that job. Yeah. But so it was nice to have a couple of people that I really respected have confidence that I could do this job that I didn't even know what it was. They saw something in me, which I really am grateful for now, that they thought I'll pull this out of this guy, So that's how I got into it, was a guy thinking I could do it and offering me the job. And I don't know if he made offers to other people that turned him down or what, but it ended up being me. And that was September of 1987. And like I said, that first year, I sort of practiced the job by working with all these artists that of course I didn't sign them. I hadn't been there.
Yeah.
Some of them I would not have signed. Some of them I certainly wouldn't have listened to their music. Yeah. But it was such great practice to get in there with them and how can we make the best record for you that we can make? And Neil also didn't want me to sign anything until I'd been there a year. And so after a year, I met a girl named Cindy Morgan, who's still
wow.
around, who would be awesome. You've had
She's
her
been
on.
on.
That's
Oh,
right. Yeah.
Love Cindy.
And we started up a friendship, and that led to my first signing. And it happened to go well. You know, I got lucky on that one. And I found out pretty soon that any A&R person that signs anything that does okay, suddenly
I think
they go.
she was New Artist of the year before us.
She was.
So is that like 90 probably? 89 or 90?
Would have been 90, I think. Yeah, because
right.
I think that record released late 89.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. And then it was Point of Grace the next year after you guys, right?
Yeah.
I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And so you probably signed Point of Grace like in what, 91?
Somewhere in there.
92?
Yeah.
Because they were, and I've had them on the podcast as well. Of course, you know, we've got so many stories with them. They're like sisters to us.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I just remember seeing them at Ouachita, you know, so many times, and them, you know, driving us around because they were part of the team that was taking care of us. And we'd come in to do a concert.
So you knew them before I did.
Oh yeah. I knew them as Say So.
Right.
And,
well, they were Say So when I met them.
Yeah. So were you part of the impetus of changing?
Oh
their
yeah.
name?
Yeah.
Oh, you're the one that came up with their name, right?
Well, to come up with it, I saw it in a book.
Right.
I saw that phrase in a book, and I wrote it down with lots of other phrases and words. But
Well, I
was
think
kind of
Shelley-
shocked that they picked that one.
I think Shelley said she read that book and can't find it anywhere.
I think it was a C.S. Lewis book.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
And, you know, coming up with a name, it's the hardest thing in the world.
It
and
really is.
You're just looking at everything and writing things down. So I think I gave them 80 or 90 words or phrases. But their manager, and I think you guys had a similar thing, their manager sent them into
Mike
a
Atkins.
room, Mike Atkins, and said, you can't dabble with this anymore. You're coming out with a name.
Yeah.
And they came out, I think, with 2 or 3 and said, help us pick one.
Do you remember some of the other ones?
I don't. But
Well, it fits.
Sunflower maybe was one.
Oh, I'm glad they didn't choose that.
Right.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't have worked.
Well, I think most of the people at
hindsight.
Word felt like Point of Grace.
Yeah.
It's terrible. But, you know, the music makes the name so
right.
often.
That's right.
Yeah.
It does. And again, for him, we never liked it.
The Beatles, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, all right.
You know,
Yeah.
there's no good names till the music makes it that way.
Yeah. Who else? Who else did you
Well,
find
at
and
Word,
sign?
probably that anybody would have heard of, Scott Crepane.
Oh, I love Scott.
So Cindy, the girls, and Scott Crepane were the 3 during that season.
Yeah. I just listened to Sometime He Calms the Storms today.
Tony Wood.
I was just like, so good. Yeah.
That while I was at Word, they developed a partnership with RCA, and we did some country stuff through that partnership with Christian artists. Well, they were Christians, but did country music. One was a guy named Ricky Skaggs, which some people have heard of, and a guy named Paul Overstreet. And I worked with those 2 people, but I didn't sign them. It was just work that I got to do with them, and that was a lot of fun. But their biggest competitor during that time was a label called Sparrow.
Yep.
And about a year before I made the decision, I got a call. They were Billy Ray Hearn, who was their CEO, was retiring. His son, Bill Hearn, was moving up into the head of the label. Peter York, who has been over A&R, was going to move up into president. So they needed a new head of A&R, and they started calling me. And it was this weird season of feeling like I was cheating on my wife, you know? Like we literally had dinners in these clandestine places because we couldn't be seen out together and all this because of this weird competition. And I never thought I would leave Word, but there's not enough time to talk about just the spiritual place of this, of feeling like, God, where are you? And where do you want me? Those kinds of struggles. But it was a very difficult decision, but I did decide to move over there. That was in 95.
I remember that.
You do?
I do.
That's weird.
Yeah, well, it was big news,
Yeah.
especially because we were out with the girls
Oh,
a lot during
yeah.
that time, too.
Yeah.
I know they loved you dearly.
Oh, that was such a tough conversation. Yeah. But it felt like the right thing. And as I look over my shoulder now over all these years, it probably was.
Yeah.
But, you know, who knows on these kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
But while I was there, they bought a label called Star Song.
Yeah.
And moved it into their system. And Newsboys was there, Twila Paris was there, did some work with them. But
Wasn't Gaither on Star Song?
I think he owned it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he was part owner.
Yeah.
So he was one of the guys selling it. But that was a good season of Nichole Nordeman, who a girl I signed there.
And she lives just down the road from me in Tulsa.
Aw,
yeah.
gold.
She's wonderful.
Matt Redman, I met Matt and signed him during that time. And if anybody knows the Passion conferences, Louis Giglio was just getting started. I met Louis and we formed a partnership. And so those three things kind of came out of that time.
So you were kind of in on the ground floor of the modern worship movement by some of those signings, right?
I not knowing it at the time,
I've had Eddie DeGarmo on, and he talks about, just getting a call from, I think it was Bill, right?
About Kingsway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, trying to figure out what to do with Delirious and that kind of stuff.
And Matt was a different animal. I did meet him through those Delirious guys, but, he played Heart of Worship for me in my office and he was still working on it. And you hear that song and you go, well, this is something different than anything I've experienced before. And just an awesome guy too. But I left out a part of my story early on. When I moved to Nashville, it was to play bass for a band called the Spears. They were a family band, quasi Southern gospel, sort of inspirational, but great people.
Legendary though, I mean.
And they were signed to a label called Benson.
Yeah.
And this would have been in '77, and from the late '70s. All through most of the '80s, Benson was the label in Christian music. That's right. Almost everybody that was anybody was on that label.
Their back catalog,
oh my goodness,
is insane.
Run at that time by the last family member to run the label called Bob Benson. And Bob was an incredibly influential guy on me. I wish I could say he mentored me. I would have never had the nerve to ask him for that, but I'm a little dinky bass player over here. But I did catch things from him whenever I was around him, A highly creative guy, but also a business guy. He integrated his life. Like spiritually, he was so integrated. I'd grown up where everything's in its right boxes, but Bob just lived his family, his work, his church life, his faith was all so beautifully integrated, and I could see that in his life as a young guy. I guess I was 19 when I first met him.
Where did you come? Where did you move in from?
A little town in West Texas called Andrews. Yeah.
Oh, where's that close? I grew up in Waco.
Oh yeah,
but I don't know that I've heard of Andrews.
Way out toward Midland, Odessa.
Oh, you're way out there.
And then I lived in Nacogdoches for a couple of years, playing with a band
down there.
That opened for the Spears one night.
Wow.
And that's how they said, we're auditioning new bass players if you want to come. And they had the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my life singing with them. And I thought, well, maybe I would see that girl again if I went to that audition. But it had been a couple of really hard years, probably my hardest dues paying years of do I want to be in music or not.
Yeah.
And
but that's good though. I mean,
it's so good for you.
So many musicians, they just want to have it all right now. And the best thing it can do is
grind it out,
do it night after night.
But I called my folks that night and said, hey, they invited me to come do this audition. I can say I went to Nashville but I'm just going to pack everything up and come on back home after this. And
so were you going to college at the time? Or?
No, I didn't go to college. I just went straight out of high school
into
look
at you.
Bands.
That's awesome.
But I thought, this time is over. I've kind of gotten that out of my system. Yeah. And of course, in the back of my head, I didn't say anything to them, but I thought I might see that girl again at that audition. But
and did you?
Long story short, I got the job and I married the girl about
I was
a year
hoping
and a half
that's where
later.
we're going to go.
Yeah, and that's Diane. We've been married 48 years now.
That's great. Wow.
2 kids.
Congratulations.
2 grandkids and 2 more to come soon.
Yeah.
So Bob is a big part of this story because while I was there at Sparrow, I'd been there about 3 years, and it was a good season for my A&R career. I get a call from the guy who then owned Benson. And by this time, as you well know, Benson had been bought and sold a handful of times.
Yeah.
It was really a shadow of what it had been in those days. And he's like, hey, we want you to come be president of Benson. And honestly, Andy, I just thought, this is my full circle destiny. Of course, this is what God wants me to do, because I knew Bob, and I can restore Benson back to the way Bob had
Back
it.
to the glory days.
Yeah. And I think God wanted me to go to Benson, but not for the reasons I wanted to go there. I did. I left Sparrow and went and took that job. And that's when you and I had our first intersection of working together.
Yeah.
We did that hymns record. And, I look back on that, and that was such a dark time for me of trying to struggle against corporate stuff to rebuild this label. And it obviously didn't work, but one of the joys of the memory of that time is getting to do that. And it's a shock to look on your, like your Spotify list, and a song from that record.
Isn't that crazy?
I'm like,
It
how
wasn't a
or
single,
why?
and
I know.
every time I look at the download numbers, I'm like, how is "Be Thou My Vision"
Isn't that crazy?
the number one?
It's a
streaming
great
song for
version of
4M?
it.
It is,
But I don't know.
it is. I just listened to that record today, and I hadn't listened to the whole thing in quite a while because I knew we were going to have this conversation today. And it is a very special record, and it's, of course, Michael Marty is such a genius.
Getting to work with that guy.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've gotten to work with him.
But
was
then
on that
your
record.
direction on that, just, how you guided us through making that record. It was our swan song at Benson. It was the last record we did there.
Yeah.
And it was, you were very gracious to help negotiate that being, because usually, people don't know this, but Christmas albums, greatest hits albums,
Right.
they're called specialty
Hymns
albums.
records.
Hymns records, right. Specialty albums that are not, not typical mainstream releases.
Yes.
Don't count against your contract. And so we had
What you're obligated to deliver.
right? And so we had one album left, and I mean, we were one of the last. You and I, for him, we were one of the last. We've turned the lights out there, didn't we?
Well,
Pretty close.
it was 2 years that I was there, and then got the notice that they're shutting it down. Yeah. So such a sad day. To feel responsible in any way for a label like Benson finally being closed down. That's terrible. And the first time I'd ever dealt with anything like that, my career, by God's grace, had been on a pretty uphill climb for all those years. And then for that to happen all of a sudden was the first real tragedy I felt like I'd faced in my life. And it's one thing to lose your job and to try to figure out what you're going to do, but there was 11 people working there that all lost their jobs in one afternoon. And now the whole industry was changing.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about there. But anyway, still, Benson got shut down. And that's a
That was
really sad
right around
day.
2001.
Yep.
So
January 4th of 2001.
Wow.
Yeah. My son's birthday.
incredible. And so much happened. Like, then 9/11 happens, and that was a big moment.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, not just for our country, but also for the, everything stopped, kind of like the pandemic in a way.
In
So
some
many of
ways.
us remember that.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the world stop like this? Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
September 11th to about September 18th.
We could probably do a whole podcast just on Napster coming along
Yep.
and that being the beginning of the end of the music business as we had all known it for so many years. And really the 15 years that followed of us trying to figure it out again, and rebuilding what we lost.
Yeah.
So anyway, dark time. You were a nice light in the middle of that, so I've always been grateful for that. But I met a family through a producer I had worked with up in Seattle who wanted to talk about starting a label. And by just what I said, like it was a terrible time. Labels were shutting down everywhere and people being laid off. This wasn't a time to talk about starting something. But a sweet family that just were very committed to the idea of it. It finally got around to, if you can't do this with us, would you help us find someone there in Nashville that could do this? And that was when you're like, well, no, don't get someone else. I don't know if I want to do it, but I don't want somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
So that began the label I work with to this day called Centricity. We're about 22 years old now.
Wow.
And a roster of 12 and a staff of about 30. So,
Wow. So who are your
we're
first
here in
signings
Franklin.
at Centricity?
we started with 3 artists. This family had sort of taken in a girl named Jamie Jamgosian.
Yeah.
Some of your listeners might have heard of Jamie. She's still around making music today and writing. So she was always going to be a part of Centricity. And then a band out of San Antonio, Texas called Circle Slide, a rock band. And a band that had been on Word and gotten dropped called Down Here, some Canadian guys. And those were the first 3 we started with.
Yeah. So Down Here, that's Mark
Martell.
Mark Martell's
And Jason,
band.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
was he part of the band when you signed
Oh,
him?
yeah. Yeah. It was a 2 lead singer band.
Yeah.
Jason Germain was the other singer. And
well,
if your listeners Google Mark Martell, they'll be surprised at what's going on with him
gosh.
today.
Yeah. He's, well, what a voice and what a career he's had.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that's what we started with. And, we signed a girl named Lauren Daigle in 2012. And that changed a lot for us as God did what he did with her career.
Yeah.
And kind of put us in a new place of being able to compete for things that we couldn't have before. And so
let's talk about Lauren just for a second.
Yeah.
That as someone who is running a label, that Lauren she's a firebrand. I mean, as soon as you hear her, it's like, whoa, that's a new voice in Christian music. She's the most likable person. But it's very Adele.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to know the evolution. Can we talk about that? Are you okay to talk about?
Of course, yeah.
Because that's fascinating to me as an artist.
Yeah.
To when I hear her, I hear Adele, and I go, okay, is this who she really is? Is this who you market her to be?
No.
Like,
and for what it's worth, I feel like, and I'm close to it, so I don't know, but I feel like she's much less Adele sounding today, her current new record, than she was back then.
Yes.
But yes, that was certainly there. But when I met her, she was just a singer in her church worship team. She had never written a song, recorded anything. So Centricity will host retreats once every year or every other year, depending on how many artists we're wanting to invite. And we invited her up to one of these retreats. Basically, it's just a camp kind of to get to know people, and they do some co-writing, and we do sessions on stuff, on how the industry works and stuff like that for them. But I had invited a band called The Assembly from Baton Rouge, where she's from, and Lauren had featured on a song on their CD, and I was looking for another girl to come because we kind of have to balance out boys and girls, and asked them about, hey, who is it singing on that second verse of that song? And they told me, and she was at LSU at the time. And I didn't hear the Adele thing at all on that. And I didn't hear her sing again until this retreat. It was only about 2 months out when I first learned about her. So she came to the retreat, and we have a thing during the retreat where everybody gets up and does a song, just so everybody can kind of get familiar. Usually I'm kind of the only one that knows what everybody does. So everybody gets up and does a song. And the night before we did that, the lead singer for the Assembly had an appendix, a rupture, had to go get surgery, and he was out for the rest of the week. So this next day, the guys from the Assembly are like, well, now what are we going to do? We don't have a lead singer. And he was just like, well, Lauren doesn't really have anything. Could she just sing some worship songs with you guys or something? I guess, so they did that. And that's really the first time we all heard Lauren sing. Yeah. And obviously there was something.
And there was like
my mom would have called it the anointing, something on that voice that was special. And very Adele. Yeah.
I remember hearing, I had her on my radio show, my worship show, before her first record came out.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And somebody had pitched her to me, and
probably somebody at our label.
Yeah, probably was.
Because we were doing anything
and
we could.
And I was like, I love her voice. Yeah, let's have her on. And she was so sweet and kind. And
man,
then I blinked my eyes, and she's the biggest, Christian artist in the world.
But very much still that same person. Like, she's just so solid as a person. But so we got back from the retreat and started doing some development work with her, and she was glad to like leave school, and she was working at Chewy's, and writing songs during the day. And what unfolded. But maybe one thing important to say in her career and her story is, the second record, the Look Up Child record, had this song "You Say" on it,
Right.
which we felt like it was a great song and would do well in Christian music, and we did single it, and it did do well. But suddenly we're getting these reports of mainstream stations playing the song. We had nothing to do with that. We didn't work that song to any mainstream stations. We wouldn't even known how to do that. And now mainstream labels are starting to call us because, like, hey, who is Lauren Daigle? I'm hearing her song. It's starting to chart on the AC Top 100, and now they want to partner with us on Lauren. And that was exciting and great. But to this day, people in sincere kindness will be like, hey, great job on Lauren. You guys did a great job. Congratulations. And you kind of want to say, if that was about us doing a great job, we'd do it with everybody, right? That's just the one God decided to do that with, and we want to steward it as best we can, right?
Yeah, you do. You do it. You do your job.
You put the seed in the ground,
but you can't make people listen to the song.
You can't bring out the fruit.
No, you can have an instinct and you can have a feeling.
Yeah,
and a lot of times it's God's going to do what He's going to do.
And Andy, I know you and I both have experienced the thing that you thought was undeniable gets no traction.
Yep.
And the thing that you think, for me, an early sign of this was Casting Crowns. This is awesome. I met all those guys at one of those GMA, talent competitions.
Yeah.
And Mark was awesome, but I never thought that would do. It's like a big church worship team.
Right.
And Mark was an okay songwriter, So I have the distinction of being the first to pass on Casting Crowns. And the things you think won't work blow up huge.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, like, is that just God's way of saying, hey, you got to bow the knee to my sovereignty in all this. You don't have it figured out.
That's
you
right.
never will.
That's right.
And just trust me to do what only I can do with some of these people you think are.
It keeps you humble for sure.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. That's funny. The thing about Lauren is that it's, again, she had this distinction about her that no one else in Christian music have, and I think that's probably what's kind of lacking in Christian music a little bit right now is the distinct voice.
I agree,
and
it's hard to find.
And it is hard to find. And when you see someone like that, you got to maximize it, take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And I've always what a great A&R person was always able to do was to go that. Push a little more there. Hey, that. You need to do more of that.
Yeah.
That's what our guys did for us.
Maybe less of that, no more of that.
Right. Or, hey guys, we don't have a radio single.
Yeah.
We need to bring something else in. We're missing a song. Or, here's where music is going. We need to get out in front of it. And, I think that's what, somebody in your position will have longevity in, is to be able to see that and sense that. And, again, I'll be forever grateful for you and
Andy, that is
Ivy
such a kind
and Bill
thing to say.
Baumgart and Brent Bourgeois.
Oh my goodness.
When we worked with him at Benson and at Word at our short stint there. And now let me ask you this. I have a memory of you playing for the Imperials. Right?
Actually, Andrus Blackwood and Company, which was an
okay. So
Terry and Sherman left the Imperials,
Right.
started their own thing, and I
Right.
played for those guys for a couple of years.
So when would you have been in the band with them?
Early 80s, probably 83, 84, somewhere in there.
Because I saw ABC and Stillwater in like 1985.
I was probably there.
Oh wow! See, I guess that was a touchstone moment for me. Like it was one of the first Christian concerts I'd ever been to where I really worshiped.
Wow!
And I really felt the Spirit of God moving. And it's not that I didn't have a great time at Imperial shows or Amy Grant or I'd seen Russ Taff and I'd seen the Cruz family and I'd seen Truth and so many others, Carmen, back even before he was huge. But it was that Andrus Blackwood and Company concert.
Interesting.
Where it was like, I feel like I'm going to come undone here.
Don't you think Sherman just had a connection? He had a great way of leading an audience into that sort of
Yep.
experience of
Yeah.
God and worship. He just had a knack for that. And, I don't know the whole story of why they left and all that. I'm sure it wasn't all great, but I was glad to get to spend a couple of years with those guys. Learned a lot.
Yeah. Anybody else who you played for back in those days?
That would be the only people. Yes, but no one that anybody would have heard of.
And then you transitioned into being a studio guy.
Yeah.
So you played on a bunch of stuff.
Christian records, a lot of jingles,
Yeah.
Some country stuff. Literally, when you're a session player, that's when you say yes a lot. Stuff that oh, I'm not going to love this today, but I'm grateful I get to play and do this for a living,
Yeah.
And back in that day, there were a lot of, when you say I'm going to do an indie record, it doesn't mean you can go in your bedroom on your laptop.
Studio.
You got to go in and learn the real thing. And a lot of indie bands, especially they didn't have songs, but they want to make a record. So you help them write songs, and all of that was early training ground for me, I think.
You said earlier that as an A&R person, you had to keep your hands out of the production of the record.
Yeah.
And that had to be difficult, being a musician and understanding, like going, I wouldn't know, but let me get in there and play it. Or let me, what if I helped you do this a little more?
I don't think at least in my case, I felt like it was something that helped me because there's a language that you speak in music recording and production, and I knew that language. And there's a guitar player here in town, Gordon Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
And he used to call me the informer. He said, "You're really working on our side." but I think that was just because I could communicate, and it was, I hope it was helpful to the producers I was working with. At least better than someone who had never been around that world, So I didn't find that a challenge. And there's always a spirit of collaboration, as you well know, between the artist and the producer and the A&R person. And the idea is that we're going to make something better together than any of us could make on our own.
Yeah.
And I think that's usually true.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's going to succeed.
Well, sometimes you got to save the artist from their worst ideas.
Well, sometimes
and save the artist from themselves. I own that. And there's so many times that, either myself, I'm making my solo record. If I didn't have A&R around me, who knows what kind of record I would have made. And now I can look back and go, I'm really proud of that. I'm glad I had really good direction and people that helped me pick the right songs and the right producers and put the right list of songs together instead of just going, well, I really want to do this. I want to push the envelope here. And I think that's what kept For Him in the right place for so long was good direction by A&R. And again, I tell young artists who are, and I coach a lot of them, who are either close to getting signed or they've just gotten signed, and there's a culture out there of I can do all this myself.
Of course,
I got my laptop, I got my TikTok followers. They all
why
love
not do
me.
it myself?
Why not do it all myself?
Yeah,
and what I try and tell them is you need that person. You need to allow somebody to walk into your life and go, that's not the best idea, and here's why. Not just who has authority over you, but someone who goes, listen, I've been doing this a long time, and I know what's going to work, and I know what's not going to work, but I'm also on your side. You want to push? I'll help you push.
Right.
But I'm also going to tell you when you're about to run the train off the tracks, because I owe it to you to do that.
Authority card. Contractually, you do have that, but that's never a card I've ever played. That there's nothing that's going to push the relationship forward. In you saying, "I'm the boss, you can't do that," or "You must do this."
Right.
You got to work it out together. And there's been so many songs and records that I've disagreed that we should do that, right? But it's what the artist wanted to do, and it's the artist's career. It's their record. If your best take on something isn't something they agree with, you got to go with what they are feeling. I'm not going to have to live with that record 40 years from now. They are,
that's right.
But I sure want to help them as much as I can.